All right, we're live. So welcome to this first instalment of Sound Advice. Tonight we have got Scott Kingman, who is from Screaming Jets, guitar player at Screaming Jets, and the mighty, mighty Horsehead. And we have JasonTong, who is from Headfirst Amplification. Lovely. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us, Woz.
Hey, Woz.
How we all met each other basically recently is Scott in lockdown decided to do a project where he wanted to build his own amp. So Jason and I have helped him, and Jason makes very, very beautiful PCB boards, and we've put together an amp. So we thought we'd get together and talk about it tonight. So Scotty, talk to us about your journey into amp making now.
Wow, holy shit, where do I begin? Well, firstly, I've got to say to you both, thank you very much for helping me get through it. I think we're kind of close to the end of the build. It's making noise. It looks good. It turns on. I'm absolutely wrapped with having done it, and I can't thank you both enough. But I guess my introduction to, well, let's start with Jace, because Jace's work is really probably the reason that someone like me with no experience could take on such a thing. I think without this PCB design, it's questionable as to whether I would have even looked at a project like this. Whereas after speaking to you, was with regards to Jace's setup and the PCBs that he builds, I guess it makes it a little bit more attainable to somebody like me who just wants to have a go at it. There's a lot of work already been done with regards to the layout, and so it kind of assists you in effect, to paint by numbers. It tells you to put what bits and pieces in what position, and you can confidently do that knowing full well that he's done the hard yards before it's even arrived at your doorstep, and I think you credit to you, Jace, for taking that stuff on over the years, and no doubt that's taken you many years to get it to that point, and we benefit from that. So I was put onto Jace through a fella called Joseph Price, who's a friend. He's done some work on my guitars through over the years, and he put up a video on his Facebook page maybe 3 or 4 months back saying, a friend of mine, Melbourne fella, check out his work. And I clicked on the link, and the tones he was getting out of these amps were just fantastic. I mean that, mate. They really are great, world-class guitar tones. There's no doubt about it. And to think that was then kind of being created somewhere in Melbourne was a bit of an eye-opener to me. And then having spoken to you was via Athel, our beautiful friend, my tech, or our guitar tech, and an associate.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, we are. I don't want him to. Anyway, Athel said you need to speak to Woz. So strangely enough, I spoke to you, Woz, and then you suggested Jace as being part of this picture as well. So there were kind of all of these arrows pointing towards Jace's work. At that point, I think I reached out to Jace, and it became his greatest pain in the ass for a 6-month period. But ultimately, really, I guess that's kind of where it all began. And I'll be straight with you, boys. I've used amps for many, many years with different acts, and I always walk up onto a stage and I'll plug a lead into these freaking things, and if the light comes on, that's a good start. And then it's tweak volume and tones until we get something that's reasonably workable. We get on with the gig, we walk away, there's another gig they can't take away from us, move on, That's been amplifiers for me. I've never really delved into the construction or design or workmanship that goes into creating these things. They've been a tool for me, and that's cool. I've always been surrounded by very clever blokes like yourselves who could address issues whenever they arose, and my job was to play guitar, write music, do all of that stuff. Whereas I kind of knew very little about the workings of an amp. So having been forced to have all of this downtime with regards to this lockdown, I figured now was a really great opportunity, and there was a couple of kind of obvious signs to pointing towards Jace's work. And Morris, you put your hand up saying I'll give you a hand and I'll help you with some advice. And off I went, and it's been incredibly rewarding. It really has. And to hear that amp turn on for the first time and to see the rewards of hours of frustration and fear is something I'll never forget, and I'll carry some newfound knowledge for the many, many years to come. Whether I'll elaborate on what it is I've learned already, I guess I probably will. My hunch is that I will. But man, what a great thing to have been able to do. And I look at that amp now, and I have a newfound respect for everything that's inside it. And there will come a time when I can stop looking at it as a technical piece, because very much now it is that for me, having been right in the guts of the technical side of the creation of it. But it will become a tool again,
Yep.
And that has to happen for me, because ultimately for me it's really important that I can write music. And but what a great thing, and here we are. I guess that's the short story.
Yeah.
Although it was very long-winded, but there you go.
Well, Jason, we were saying before, we can't believe how quickly you powered through the build. Yeah? Like, how long do you think it took you from starting soldering iron, touching the board to finishing it?
Well, I mean, I guess you need to incorporate the ordering of all of the parts and pieces, and and I'm one to really get online and not only order a 32K 5% tolerant resistor. I need to know what the fuck it is, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of study and reading and watching of tutorials, and some of the resources online are incredible. Jace has put me on a couple of sites. I've got to say, before all of this even happened with seeing Jace's vid through Joe, I got into a YouTube channel, and I know you guys know this fellow, Uncle Doug.
Oh yeah.
And his knowledge and respect and the way that he teaches, he's obviously a fantastic educator, a beautiful comic mind, and keeps you interested, but whilst bestowing all of this incredible old world knowledge in a very kind of palatable and interesting way, right? So I would find myself just sitting watching his videos for hours on end, right? This is even before I decided to do this. You get down that rabbit hole of YouTube every now and then, and all of a sudden some things will stick with you and other things you'll flick on to the next thing. But Doug got me, and it was repairing a 1953 Fender fucking something or another, and taking the doghouse off for the first time to look at filter caps that had exploded, and like, what is this shit? So anyway, Uncle Doug really got me, and so I guess you need to that needs to be part of the equation when you ask me how long did it take you.
Yep.
I reckon it's been a good sort of 6 to 12 months in the making, and that's from my first Uncle Doug video through to reading, through to ordering, through to waiting for bits and pieces to arrive in the post. I guess once it was all assembled, I reckon I probably had the bulk of it done within a week, probably 7 solid days of a good 4 or 5 hours a day. I would find myself pacing for half an hour before I took the next step, wondering whether I was doing the right thing. And, it's very important that I've discovered with this stuff is the order of of which you take on these tasks, because you never want to have to go backwards, right? So it's walking on eggshells and being very mindful and sure about the next step before you move ahead. So I'd get online and I'd read, or I'd ask you guys a question and I'd wait for a reply, and then I'd figure out your answer. And, I was very, very careful, and I knew I was in no rush because, let's face it, we're all stuck at home here, right? So I guess the longer it took, the better for me, because it enabled me to keep myself busy in a time when, you know, we're all going mad with frustration to the fact that we can't do what we do. So from start to finish, my guesses will be about a month. Solid hours worked, I reckon, somewhere between 50 to, I said 100 in my first sort of switch on video, but I reckon somewhere 50 to 70 solid hours, you know, putting together bits and pieces, and then I'd get stuck because I didn't have one resistor that was the right value, or I'd be waiting on a couple of, you know, imperial threaded nuts that didn't exist, and all of these bits, you know, just stuff that now I've got 150 of them sitting in a bag, and I needed 3, right?
Now you've got to pick another one just to use them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Jason, I love your thought process, mate. So this is where, you know, I reckon the next one I could get done in half of the time. A, in confidence in knowing what it is I'm actually doing, and B, I kind of ordered double of everything I needed in case I ruined one bit and I had it there on, you know. So, you know, it wasn't long enough was, I guess, the answer to your question. I really love doing it, mate, you know, and the skill and the art in just getting the right solder to look the right way is something that you got to take pride in this stuff. And I really, having watched people like Uncle Doug and read beautiful, you know, descriptive books about the technical side of this science, and it's not a very creative kind of. I come very much from a creative background, whether it be visual or music. Very creative stuff with regards to building these amplifiers, or at least I'm yet to discover that. It's pure technical, you know, and the cleaner your work, the better the result will be with regards to all things, tone, if you need to backtrack to troubleshoot, all of that stuff is very, you know, and I could be completely wrong in thinking that, but that was my thought process, was that kind of way of thinking. And I can't wait to do another one.
Well, you know, looking at the pictures of what you did, Scotty, and what you posted, your work is very, very clean, right? Very clean.
Yeah, you're making us look bad, dude.
Well, that's nice of you to say. It's probably going to get a lot sloppier over time. I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
The first one is always beautiful, and then you get a bit faster.
Right, you know, and I have no doubt that I'll suffer from that syndrome myself. But there's something great about looking at beautiful works, and I think was early on you mentioned the work within high watts, you know, and I was just saying to you guys before we kicked in that this guy Marcus Reeves, who's making these boutique pedals, there's fellas out there that are really taking this stuff to almost introducing creativity to a very technical form, you know. They're really inducing their own look and style, and even when it comes down to the choice of lead dress and color of lead dress, you know, these are the areas of which I guess you can start being creative to a certain extent. You can really put your own stamp on these things, and I love that stuff. I'm kind of all about that. You know, I get great reward out of that, but also keeping intact the fundamentals of the science and you know, the technical side of it. You know, yeah.
So, Jason, how did you fall down this rabbit hole and get started?
It's a really good question, was. So I started this whole thing by modding an amp that I already had. So what
was the amp?
It's probably 10 plus years ago. A PV Classic 30.
Oh,
right amp.
Oh, what a way to start.
Yeah, killer little amp. Like that.
Right.
Once you figure out how to take out of the chassis, the board.
Nightmare. I mean, at the time, it was kind of like I'll just get into it, and I'd always, like, ever since I started playing, I'd always muck around with something, right? Like I'd always work on my own guitars, or you know, change pickups, that kind of stuff. I'd never built a tube amp before, but I had studied electronics when I was at uni, long time ago. So it was kind of, that knowledge was always in in my brain there somewhere, and I came across, I had this Classic 30, and it sounded pretty cool, but I just got curious, right? And I came across, there was a I don't know if the website's still around. Blue Guitar.
Yep, Steve Aloha.
Yes, that dude. Yes. Yeah, I knew you'd know. So he's got this website full of mods and stuff, right? And he's got he had a whole section on modding a PV Classic 30. Really improving, not so much working on the clean channel, but more on the overdrive channel and that amp. And just one day I thought, I'll just, I'll do it, right? So I ordered some parts. I can't remember whether I got them just at JCar or whatever. I can't quite remember. But I kind of looked. It was the usual. It's a bit like what you went through, Scott, where he had a list of kind of parts that you needed to do a bunch of mods that he had to this PV Classic 30. So I found all the the right capacitors and resistors and so on, and then figured out how to pull that bloody, because it's in the Classic 30, it's 2 circuit boards folded like that,
yeah,
on right angles,
yeah,
and
with little wire links.
Yes, and the links and they break.
Oh.
The links break, as I found out, because as soon as you move those boards, they're really brittle, those links, and they snap, and you've got to rewire them all. And so countless times, because it was the usual thing, right? I'd change like 1 or 2 things, and I'd put it back in to the chassis to hear it, right? Because I wasn't brave enough to just try and do a whole lot of stuff and then put it back in, because I was crapping myself that it would never work again, ever. Mm-hmm. So it's just one thing at a time. But every time I pulled it out, put it back in again, and there'd be no noise, and I'd like, oh no, what have I done, right? And I'd, sure enough, pull it back out, and I realised one of the links had broken. And that's the beginning, I guess, of the troubleshooting, because it's actually what I found in this whole learning curve is troubleshooting problems that's where you learn.
Sure.
You kind of figure shit out, right? Because you've got to, you can ask questions and you post stuff on forums or whatever, and the internet's amazing for that. But the stuff that you learn from just figuring out where issues have come from, that's the goal, yeah. So I did that, and I got that Classic 30 sounding like, it was pretty killer. I ended up selling it to a mate of one of my kids, actually, who was a budding young guitar player at the time. He used to come over here all the time and play all my guitars and amps and stuff like that, and he loved that Classic 30. So I sold it to him. I can't remember how much for. Then I went like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I got a couple of kits from Nick at Seriatone. That was the next step. And I got his 18 watt, it's a Marshall 18 watt, not too dissimilar to the power section in the amp that you just built, Scott, the EL84 18 watt Marshall, but it was tube rectified. It's like a 1974X Marshall circuit. He's got a kind of a clone of that, and a Yeti, which is it's a Cameron Jose style circuit, right? And I got 2 kits. I was bold enough to get 2 at once. Did the 18 watt first, and that was like the experience that you just had, Scott. It was it was pretty straightforward amp though, right? No relays, no channel switching, single channel amp basically. And it was the experience of you do it, and I took ages over it, but I didn't have to go and get all these parts because everything came in a box. Everything you need down to the single resistor, heat applied, and a kit. Like everything. Which was a nice way to start when you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And that was the experience where I turned the amp on the very first time and it worked. It's like, oh my God, can't believe it. This thing's amazing, right?
What a moment.
It's a tube amp. Oh my God, listen to it. Yeah. There's nothing quite like it. And then the Yeti was more complex because it's more complex, and it was a 50 watt. So you're going from two EL84s to 2 EL34s, and this thing, the 50 watts at 470 odd volt plate voltage. It's a beast. I myself imagine building a 100 watt amp. Oh my God, that'd be amazing. So after I built the kits, probably a year or so went by before I kind of got into the next thing, and I heard a Dirty Shirley I came across these Dirty Shirley amps, Friedman Dirty Shirley on YouTube. And I thought, my God, that thing sounds amazing. So I thought, I wonder if I could build one. And I got back into it because I kind of did the kits, and it was like, and I was using those amps that I built. But I don't know, for some reason I didn't have the momentum to just go straight into another build. I just kind of used those amps for a bit, because I just got back to decide I'll just play, But the Dirty Shirley got me curious again, and it was a single channel amp, so I knew that the complexity of it was maybe something I could do. Because it's like a 3-channel amp with relays and all the rest of it. It was like, oh God, wouldn't know where to start, right, at that point. So I started researching what the Dirty Shirley was, trying to find I did every Google search you could possibly imagine, right, and try to get on different forums and all the rest of it. Eventually started to piece together what the circuit was, figure it out, right? So it's basically a variation of a JCM 800 preamp into a tube rectified JTM 45 power stage, or less. 5881 tubes in it, and I couldn't find the last remaining details were elusive, right? So I just had to kind of take the plunge and see if I could make it work. And that was the first amp that I built where I just actually order all the parts. So got myself a Mouser account and all the rest of it, right? Ordered transformers from, I think they were classic tones. I think magnetic components. I think I ordered them from Amp Parts Direct in the US. Got a chassis from, I can't remember where I got the chassis. I think I got the chassis from Modulus. Have you ever checked those guys out? So Michael, he's up in Scotland.
Yeah.
He's got a great amp. If you want parts and stuff, chassis and bits and pieces, he's got a great online store, and he's really helpful. He actually burnt plates for me as well. So that's right, because he had an 2mm aluminium chassis. It's kind of Marshall small box size, and I've grabbed a couple of those over the years and built stuff with them. And he's got a engraving machine, so he had matching faceplates and all the rest of it. So that became my Dirty Shirley, which I've still got. I ended up building 2 of them because I built one for a mate who lives down the Mornington Peninsula, and that's become his favourite amp.
Interesting.
And they were turret board, so it was a good old, just perforated board. Got all the turrets, had to whack them all in my hand. So I laid out. I used DIY-LC, which is it's electrical layout program. It's just a free online one, right? It's freeware, and you can actually, I find it really helpful. So the layouts that I have on site or in the documentation for my PCBs, I lay them all out just using that software. Pretty easy to use. Yep. So you can drag capacitors and resistors and wires, and you can do like a virtual layout before you actually do it. And I use it to test. I actually use that software to test the PCB before I've gone and got it manufactured, to check that I've got all the connection points on it, on and off the board, because it's easy to forget, right? It's really easy to forget if you connect connections until you try and wire it up. So I use that. So I did with that Dirty Shirley, I did the layout kind of virtually in this program to kind of figure out how I could lay it all out on the turret board. So when I got the parts, I knew where to hammer all the turrets into, right? If you look at that turret board layout, it looks very similar to a turret board Marshall.
Yep.
So I could kind of follow, as had countless photos of Marshalls and stuff like that. So I use it as a bit of a guide. And again, got that into the point where I turned it on, and shit, it sounded good. It's like, that is an amazing sounding amp, and still today I'll go and play it, turn it on and play it today, and it's like, wow,
Wow.
The Dirty Shirley is a beautiful amp.
My favourite by far.
You might be describing my next build, right?
Yeah, I reckon it'll suit you, man. It's
Yep.
Is it a 50 watt?
But it's nice, and it's kind of, it's really playable. It's not, I wouldn't call it spongy, but it's a bit forgiving.
It's got a valve rectifier as well, so that it's spongier.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's just a beautiful kind of vintagey sounding, but also nice kind of combination of modern and vintage kind of coming together. Yeah, it's a killer amp.
Nice.
Really,
And it's a 50 watt amp. Did you say?
It's 40 watts. Yeah,
40.
it's a 40, but yeah. The tube. I think it's slightly lower plate voltage, and it's it uses a 50 watt plexi output transformer.
Okay.
It's been verified by Dave Friedman. It's a 3K6 primary, straight up normal plexi output transformer on it. So in theory, you could run the L34s with it, but he uses the stock amps.
I actually, before I even knew about the Dirty Shirley, I built something that was very similar.
Yeah, right.
But I had EL34s in the output stage.
Yeah, cool.
My friend Marky's got that amp now, and oh my god, what an amp! It's killer.
They sound amazing.
Yeah,
you just dial them in and go.
No, I did not. That was my idea too, you know. But it's a great amp. Great amp.
Yeah, it's just one of those amps that you just cannot get a bad sound out of it. You just set everything at midday and you go, that's just beautiful.
Wow.
I actually think that in terms of all the stuff that he's done, that's his best amp. But it's not a seller because everyone wants the metal tone and all the rest of it. Right?
And that Buxom Betty amp that he does.
Yeah, right. I never played through those, but yeah.
Oh my god, those are my two favorites. That Buxom Betty is beautiful.
Yeah.
Fender front end, Marshall output stage. Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Because I've done. I'll come to that. Depending on how much time we've got, I'll tell you about that story as well. So I got into. So I did that turret board, Dirty Shirley, and then I was fully into it. Then once I'd done that, I was like, God, I'm into this, and I started joining. I joined a few forums, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slow Clone was one of them.
Yes, Burger.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. And it was there that so it's interesting, right? This thing's introduced me to a bunch of people, including you guys, right? So there's a guy on there, Kurt May. His name's KD May on the thing, and he built a Dirty Shirley as well. This guy lives in Box Hill.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. And we were on there's this Dirty Shirley thread on Slow Clone where everyone was kind of, chipping in on different builds I'd done or, a bit of debate on different parts of the circuit and so on. And he saw my thing, it had, Melbourne, and he sent me a PM. Now, subsequently, Kurt's become a fantastic mate of mine, right? Great guy. He's built shitloads of amps, and he introduced me to Don, who's the guy behind Melbourne Amp Company.
And they did an amp with Dave Leslie as well.
Correct. So
Don's great.
Don's got a bunch of things in his lineup, but he builds custom amps for people as well. And he's certainly done a few amps for Dave Leslie. Don's he's genius, that guy. He's I've learned shitloads from him too. He's really, really helpful. And it was him that actually suggested that I learned to do PCBs, because as I was saying to you guys before we went online that I built a couple of amps, and I had the Dirty Shirley actually. I built the Dirty Shirley, and I wanted an effects loop in it because I was actually gigging with it, and I was using it live, and I needed to have a solo boost, right? Get a volume boost, and I wanted to put delay through the loop as well, and I reverse engineered the Metro loop and drew out the schematic for it because I had one, and created a hand, as I was saying before, right? A hand etched PCB, which was an interesting place to start. I had to hand drill all the holes in there. Yeah, right, done all that, and it took ages to do this thing, but I did it, and I stuck it in my amp, and it worked. I was like, shit, this is amazing. This thing works like a real fix loop, right? So I was pretty proud of what I did, and I showed Don, and he laughed at me, and he said, mate, you could get 50 of those for $10. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, you get them made in China. I said, yeah, you've got to design them, right? And he goes, yeah, you'll figure it out. He gave me a few tips. He said, look, and he actually sent me one of his, he sent me a small file with a few examples in it, and that was enough to get me started. So I can't thank Don enough for getting me started, because
Nice.
I did that. I did the loop board, which is only like this, right? Tiny little board, and it's got, what is it, a dozen components on it. And it took me ages to do it, because it was a learning curve of learning that software.
Yeah.
The PCB layout just took ages. But once you get started, it's like building an amp, right? You kind of go through a learning curve and you get better and better at it. Got a bunch of those loops done, and they worked. And I was like, shit, this is amazing. So I was just using them for my own builds, yeah. And then, so speaking with Kurt, who was the other guy on that guy in Box Hill that I got to know really well, and we were always kind of building something. He had a Jubilee clone from Seriatone that he had modded into a Wizard Modern Classic, right? Which is basically a hot rodded Jubilee, Marshall Jubilee, right? Yep. I know the Wizards sounded amazing. I was like, my God, that thing sounds incredible. It was a single channel. You just did the lead channel of a Modern Classic, and I thought, oh my God, I really want to build one of those. So I started researching that stuff and realised that to do a proper one, you need a bunch of relays. It's a channel switching amp with boosts, got cathode bypass boosting and all this kind of stuff in it. And I tried for ages to figure out how to do it on a turret board, right? And complex. I mean, you kind of could do it, but man, it was. If you ever looked inside one of those Wizard amps, you'll see that
it worked on a
turret board. My God.
Yeah.
Pretty courageous kind of build.
Yeah, totally. And they're roadworthy too. Like they handle because I do all the airborne stuff as well. Yeah, so they got a bunch of those.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You would have been around Wizards a bit, yeah? You would have seen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Heaps.
Yeah. So so that was having just kind of conquered the tiny little loop board and having this goal of like, oh shit, I'd love to do one of these Wizards. I said about that was the big leap into kind of actually trying to do a circuit board for an amp. So again, it took ages to get that first one done. I did a Modern Classic. I had the lead channel sorted out. I knew we had a pretty clear idea what that was. The rhythm channel, with a bit of help from Kurt, we didn't kind of quite know how the rhythm channel was, so we basically created one, right, just based on kind of putting something together. That was kind of version 1 of the board, right? Version 2 of the board's evolved a bit, and it's much closer to how the rhythm channel is in the MC2, but it was creating that this was all doing. I wanted to do this for me. When I started doing these boards, it was for my own builds. And then once I kind of got them up and running and realised that these things were working, someone, maybe it was Kurt, I can't remember, someone said to me, you could sell those. I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Because people would want to build that with those things. I was like, yeah, nah.
Who
would want to do that? Who's crazy enough? Who's crazy enough to do that? Yeah, Scott. Sure enough, this crazy.
I've got to say, and I mean not to interject here, but strangely, I'd built a couple of pedals prior to all of this over the years earlier, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even a little longer. But ultimately, kits, right? You get a little piece, you get a bag, a Ziploc bag, and it's got a PCB and an enclosure and a bag of resistors and leads and whatever, and you put it together. And one thing I did kind of realise throughout this build is the way that PCB of yours kind of works in that respect is that it's not dissimilar to a massive guitar pedal. You know what I mean? And so having done that earlier on kind of helped me to get a slight understanding of what was required with your work, but that would never have been the case had you not come up with these PCBs, mate. So Kurt was on the money, I've got to say,
Well, it was kind of like, and the other thing was like I thought, if I put them out there, because I didn't have a website or any crap like that, right? All I had was, I could post on the forum. So this was mostly around slow clone.
Yep.
And I posted on. I think I created a thread. I can't remember exactly how it went down, but I think I created a thread on there around the modern classic. And it was like, just put a few feelers out there. If I did a board, would anyone be interested? And it was like, everyone was like, yeah. So I was like, quite surprised. I mean, all these guys were in the States mostly, right? The people that are on that forum who are DIY builders. But I ended up doing it, and I did an MTL as well, which is just like the modern classic, but it's got another gain stage.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an easy kind of addition from there. And then I did the mini Scott, which was the board that you built. And like one of my kids helps me, right? So the only way I get this kind of done in terms of like, shipping orders out and stuff is one of the kids does it. Because
awesome.
I couldn't be fucked up.
Yeah. All right.
So, like going down to the post office and filling out the customs form, because most of these go international. So on any given week, there's a few orders that come in, right? So these things, like here's one, I showed you one before, right? These things, they've been shipped to Germany, to Finland,
Fantastic.
through the States. Obviously in Oz as well. Mate, Indonesia, Thailand, everywhere. It's amazing. And I get repeat customers too, right? So there's a couple of guys in the States that just come back every month and buy another couple of boards. And
it is kind of an addictive pastime, I've got to tell you, especially when you've got time to do it. It's questionable whether I would do too many more of these had my work schedule continued on the way that it was. But as it is right now, when, and I guess having an interest in it, having just finished one of them, it's really quite a therapeutic experience, just being so focused in on this one thing. And
mate, I've got a question for you, because I know you posted a video about this. How was that feeling when you first flicked that power switch?
I was honestly prepared to film absolute disaster occurring.
Was that right? Because I've seen the video of that. Was that literally the first time?
That was absolutely. I said the whole way through I would film this moment, and I thought, well, and I paced around this very room for 45 minutes thinking, well, I'm ready, but I can't do it. and I think I said on the video, I spoke to Paulie from the band. I said, mate, I'm ready, but I just can't do it, mate. He said, flick the frickin' switch, mate. So that was absolutely the very first time that I was really nervous, dude. And I kind of was thinking, those moments it's all about hindsight, that you think, oh shit, if I'd only done that, this wouldn't have happened, And I kept thinking past the point of me hitting that switch and just going and smoke erupting and popping and whatever. So I thought, well, I had really taken my time and was attentive the whole way through it. And I thought, well, I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. So this is it. Hit record, film it. And man, when that light turned on, I was just stoked to see the indicator light turned on. Fuck, I've got a 6.3 volt light working. And that was a massive win. And then it took another half an hour before I even went near the standby switch. But dude, what a great feeling, and it's probably that feeling that'll get me into the next one if it happens,
That's no the doubt. Thing I don't know whether you find this right, but when I'm putting together something, I start to race a bit. Like if it's my amp particularly, right, where I know that it's not going to go out the door, it's always going to be here. If something's wrong with it, I can fix it, whatever. Mm-hmm. I start to rush a bit because I just want to turn it on.
Yeah, same.
I just can't wait to turn it on.
Right.
Yep. If I'm building something for someone else, which I've done a bunch of, I'm much more kind of methodical, and careful and all the rest of it, right? Because I know that once it goes out the door, it's got to work for it's for the foreseeable future, right? For its lifetime. But when I'm doing my own stuff, go pretty fast.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd known, you know, you get to the point where you start wiring in that you put the board in and you start wiring everything to that board, and and the whole way through you're thinking, shit, if I need to get under that board again, I've got 60 points to desolder just to get to something that you know. So it's all about this, make sure you're making the right move before you make the next step kind of thing. And you know, if that last move is to hit that power switch, it was an incredible half an hour. That I truly was nervous, and I've played big gigs, you know, a couple of whatever. All of those TV moments meant nothing as compared to just hitting that freaking power switch.
How long did it take? So, you know, because I've seen the video of you turning the power on, right? And then we saw the tube filaments, you know, the EL84 came alive, and then obviously through the preamp tubes as well.
Yep.
What was the process from there to when you actually put the guitar in?
So this is interesting, because what I'd remembered Uncle Doug said at one point was that you needed to use a super high, get as high a wattage globe in your bulb limiter as you possibly can, because if you run a low wattage bulb, you're actually, and I think I'm correct in saying this, but you're adding too much resistance to the circuit, and that can create issues, right?
Yeah.
So, and what I'd noticed was that the EL84s were starting, the filaments were heating up, but the 12AX7s weren't lighting up, right?
Yeah, wow.
And I noticed this, and that was right towards the end of this video, and I thought, I'm just going to turn this off now. That fucking indicator light's on. I'm done. I'm turning it off. And as soon as I turned it off,
at that point when the 12AX7s didn't light up.
So I turned everything off, and I stood there and I thought about it, and I knew that I'd had a 54 watt globe in that bulb limiter, remembering what Doug had said, that this can create issues if you have a low wattage bulb in it, right? So I thought, you know what, smoke, no smoke, we're good. There was no smoke. I would have had a super bright bulb and some smoke had something was really going wrong. So I thought, I do remember him saying, this could create issues for you. Have you got a low wattage bulb? So I thought, I'm taking that out of the link. You know, I'm removing that from the situation, and I'm going to give it full power. And as soon as I did that, the 12AX7s heated up. And as soon as that happened, I plugged the guitar in and I hit standby, and I just went, hello, and there it was. And that's when I sent you guys a video. I got it works. So, I mean, it was. And so this, you know, strangely enough, it was the words of Uncle Doug that I must have watched 8 months earlier that told me about this. Be very careful if you're going to use a low wattage globe, that this can create issues. And I thought, there's no smoke, we're good. Indicator light, we're good. Get that thing out of the chain.
You did a fantastic job, right? Because I tell you, the board that you built on, I get an email every week from someone who says, I turned it on and it doesn't work.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All the time. Well, maybe not every week, but plenty of people. Yeah.
Well, you know, as nice as that is for you to say, you know, I checked every step with both of you fellas.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And you're an incredible knowledge base, and that absolute testament to your customer service there. Good, and I was preparing for you, dude. You need to figure this shit out for yourself. Leave me alone, because I could tell I was asking a lot of you at times when you're at work, and you know, dude. So I thank you, and same with Woz. I mean, God knows if I'd even have a house left had you not been there to answer these questions when I needed them. So as good as that is to hear, and man, I was fucking stoked when that thing worked first time. I truly was. But
you've got to trust that sometimes if you've got it completely wrong when you turn it on, then the isolating switch on your
we've got breakers now, man.
Well, I had a really high quality power board involved too, so it was going to trip regardless. But I had a plan. I had a plan. If it didn't work, and I shit you not, I had a box and bubble wrap ready to pack the thing and send it straight to Woz. That was That's what I was going to do.
Ready to go.
Without a doubt, that's exactly what I was going to do. So when I heard that first, buzz come from me tapping the top of that guitar lead, it was what a great moment.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's just, yeah. So you played your lead and you went like,
yeah, and then plugged the guitar in, and checked both channels. And I didn't know what to expect. I'm still asking you, how many channels has this thing got? Fucking 2 days before I'd finished it. I was really just making sure I was trying to stick to the plan as best as you give it to me, and I really do understand that amp now. Even the functions of the relays and obviously there's certain things, but even just the grounding points and how those relays work. What a massive kind of moment of discovery that was for me to realise what the function of these relays can incredibly change the functionality of that PCB and the way that amp can change from one thing to the other at the drop of a hat, purely on the back of the function of those relays. I mean, I didn't know what a fucking relay was. I had no idea, let alone little everything else. But, dude, fantastic. What a great thing.
Well, that's what I like about your boards as well, is that it's not a straight copy. Yeah, you allow for quite a lot of variations in the circuit as well, which I kind of dig.
Right.
Like you could have just copied it, but you didn't.
Yeah,
you took it a couple of steps further, which I like. Yeah,
I try to like that. Again, like at the heart of this thing is like, well, what would I want?
Right.
Like you could clone you could just do a straight up clone, and that's whatever, right? People do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like and I can't sit here and say I've never cloned anything, because I have, but often I've tried to kind of like, I've tried to go, well, look, if I had that amp, if I'm going to build this, because I always want to build one for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best thing, right? So whenever I've done something, I've always built one that's going to be mine. So before I do that, I always think about, well, what would I want? And, in a gigging situation or whatever, what are the things that I want to have on it? And that PCB that you built with Scott, that was inspired by, so a mate of mine who lives in Carnegie, just up the road here. He had albeit briefly, he had a JJ Junior, Friedman JJ Junior, which is a Gary Cantrell, and it's a little 1820 watt EL84. The Friedman Mini series. He's got a Dirty Shirley Mini, Pink Taco, and whatever. They're all the same power stage. The power section in those amps is all the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's straight up copy of the 20 watt lead and bass Marshall.
Yep.
Right.
State rectified EL84 cathode bias power stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just got a bunch of different preamps, right? So he's got the Dirty Shirley preamp, Taco, blah, blah, blah.
And
Pink Taco,
the same architecture, yeah? All those amps share the same board, yeah? That's correct?
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. It just changes a few things. Like all the big Friedmans, the 100 watters, are all the same PCB. Okay. Same chassis, and it just changes a few a few components here and there. So if you look at like the Steve Stevens, the SS100 compared to the Brown Eye 100,
it's not radically different. Same architecture.
Changes, something.
Yeah.
Just voicing differences. Yeah. So I borrowed this. I already knew what the circuit was for the JJ Junior, because it had already been posted all over the internet. Well, it was on Slow Clone anyway. Before I grabbed my mate's one, but I just wanted to grab it just to play through it. By then I'd already the circuit was already kind of like there, and I realized that this is just the Brown Eye preamp with a couple of voicing changes. So that JJ circuit has a slightly lower in the depth circuit. Fixed depth is sort of slightly lower frequency, so it's got a bit more subby.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, and it's got the diode clipping kind of the Jose style diode clipping that, the sat switch that Friedman has. That was in the amp as well. But there's no, apart from channel switching, there were no relays in that amp. The channel switching relay, so you could flick between a 2-channel amp on the original, that JJ Junior. And I thought, that's kind of okay. But why not make it 3 channels, right? So have the clean channel and then have 2 gains and 2 masters for the lead. That would be cool. And the reason why having 2 masters is important, I think, is that you can set the gains different. Right? So you have a kind of a mid-breakup kind of sound for maybe channel 2, and then channel 3 you could have the gain a bit more cranked for, full-on kind of lead tone or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you could set both the gains the same, dial the channels in identically, but just set the masters at different levels. So you've got a volume boost for a lead, right? So you don't have to piss around with boosts in the effects loop or whatever. You just have it on. So I thought, that'd be cool. So then I'd also, I had built I don't have it anymore, but one of the things I did do in my little journey of learning stuff, I took a Stereotone 50-watt plexi and converted it into a 2-channel small, like a Friedman small box style, and that was my first playing around with using relays for channel switching and stuff. That was back in the days when I was hand etching my own PCBs in a liquid bath and all the rest of it, right before I got into actually designing them properly with software. But I realized that what he was doing to create a plexi channel was just taking out a gain stage. I was like, oh, okay. So you take the gain stage out, and if you've set up your the way he's got the preamp tubes kind of biased and set up, it's an exact plexi channel but with a master volume. I guess
like a 4-inputter going into the treble.
Yeah, I mean, if you dimed the master volume on that amp, so Scott, like your amp, right? If you actually put that in plexi mode and you turn the master volume on 10, and then you just use the gain, you're actually running. That's like a 4-hole Marshall with the volume.
So the channel master or the master volume, the global master or the channel master.
Oh, so you got a global master as well. So if you put your global master on 10, you put your channel volume on 10, then that gain pot is like a volume pot on a 4-hole plexi.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Yep.
In other words, it'll be clean as, right, until you get it to about, whatever.
2 o'clock.
Yeah, and then she'll be like cooking. But
I found that, for me, the sweet spot on that, from what I found so far, is on the plexi mode with the boost on, 2 o'clock on the channel volume and 2 o'clock on the gain.
Yeah.
What's the boost?
Yeah.
Sorry.
What does the boost kick in?
What does the boost do? Yeah. So the boost is the so the other thing I kind of learned through the whole just again learning circuits and figuring out what people were doing, and by people I mean the amp manufacturers out there, cathode bypassing.
Okay.
Preamp. Yeah. Yep. So that was something I kind of was like, you start to get your head around, right? So you figure out how to, you can bias a tube with the cathode resistor, right? So kind of a 2K7 with a 100K plate resistor is pretty common. But if you look at a JCM 800, that's that second gain stage, the 10K cold clipper, or Warwicke you mentioned before, right? But like the Soldano with a 39K very cold biased tube, you realize that after you more and more you learn about the stuff, that you can actually change the tone just with how you bias the tube. So playing around with bypass caps on those cathode resistors was something that I just by studying circuits, I just keep studying on. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent looking at.
I can only imagine. And so is that what this boost is actually doing?
I spent heaps of time researching. So like just in any spare time, that's kind of what I mean, apart from playing, I still love to play. I'll play guitar every chance I get. But if I'm not doing that, I'm researching something to do with that.
It's kind of a subtle boost, but it's kind of not at the same time, if you know what I mean. It's not a boost how in the way that I.
Yeah, it's probably more of a. You could probably call it maybe a voicing or.
Yeah.
It's
a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's not like a whole triode sitting that switches into the circuit.
But it's additive to that plexi channel in a good way. I kind of very much like it.
So the boost is without the boost on, there's no capacitor across that cathode.
Bingo.
Yeah. So you're just kicking in like a 0.68. Yeah.
Correct. So
right.
that
that's actually stock. Really? Yeah.
So it's the first gain stage is so the channel without. So if you're not in plexi mode and you're in the normal, let's just call it when you first turn it on, I guess.
Yep.
It's 2K7 with a 0.68 UF bypass on the first gain stage. The second gain stage is 2K7, and then that bypass cap switches in or out based on the boost. And you can do, because it's relay activated, you've only kind of got two states. But if there was no relay, if you weren't doing it with a relay and you used a three-way switch, then you could have three different modes on that, which I've done. You could have like a 10K, a 2K7, and 2K7 with a bypass or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is where you start,
So the benefit of using a relay is the speed of that switch and the fact that it introduces no noise to that change, right? It's a silent switch almost. Like am I right in thinking that or not?
Well, it depends what you're switching, right? So switching in a bypass cap, you can normally get away with.
Okay.
Changing the cathode resistor from like a 2K7, which is what's on your amp at the moment, to like 10K, you actually get a change in the DC, and it'll get this whack. It'll pop through the amp
okay.
Massive pop. You'll go, whoa!
So as you say, it depends on what it is you're using it for, right?
Yeah, the only way to get rid of it is the mute circuit to mute the amp for a millisecond or something while you do the switch.
It really does. The functionality of that amp just gets amplified by the use of those relays, though, doesn't it? I mean,
the cool thing about the relays is that then you can make all those functions foot switchable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can do them. Yeah. Correct. You can
which is what I've done.
Yeah, you can use a MIDI controller. And when I built the so my one, right, I did a 6v6 version of exactly what you've just built.
Yep.
And I got switchable fixed and cathode bias on it, but I only ever used it in fixed bias mode. I tried every option with the build that I did every single thing I possibly did. But I put I made it MIDI controllable, and that's where those relays really come into play, because you can store presets.
Yep.
And then use a MIDI foot controller.
So is there another? Do you add another board within the system to control that? Right?
So I got a little MIDI board, and I wrote some software for it. Was a small one or a couple or whatever.
Okay.
So
I mean, the possibilities are endless with this shit, really, aren't they? Wow.
This is it.
Board. I got one too.
Yeah, there it is. This is my test one. So I've got like you can see little LEDs on here.
Right. Yeah.
So I've been switching these LEDs off and on to simulate switching relays.
Yeah, functions. Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah.
I wrote because that was my first when I in my kind of day job. First part of my working life in my day job, I was a programmer. So that when you think about what PCB design's like with the software environment that's used to do the PCB design. I mean, you're not writing code. It's not like that at all. But it's kind of, it's not too dissimilar in some.
Yeah,
in some
it's
way.
connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not totally foreign to you when you look at it, I dare say.
Yeah. So again, I bought some MIDI switching stuff overseas, and then again, it was just one of those things, right? It took, I don't know, working it probably 6 months. I thought, I should write my own one, and then I did. It took a while, but it's just like you just chip away at it, and then eventually you get it to work.
You're still playing too, Jace, right? Are you doing gigs still?
Yeah, look, mate, I haven't gigged for probably. When did COVID start? So.
Okay, but I'm removing the COVID situation.
Yeah.
Is that why you're not gigging? I mean, prior to that, we
in a covers band here in Melbourne.
Yeah, cool. Yep.
But yeah, so you could probably hear it if you haven't picked up already. I'm a Kiwi.
I have picked up on that. A fair guitar player too, dude. I got to tell you.
So what's that, man?
A nice guitar player too. I got to tell you.
Yeah. No.
Which undoubtedly helps with your design. I mean, as you said there a bit earlier, that you design things the way that you would want them, being a guitar player, and that converts to the way these things sound when you turn them on. Yeah, very much so, which is a massive bonus, I think.
Yeah. So, but back in, I've been in Melbourne for 15 years. But I lived here for 3 years in the late 90s before actually going back to Auckland for a few years before coming back. Came back in 2005. So through the 90s, I was playing in a lot of bands back there, originals and covers and that kind of stuff. I was actually in an originals band. We recorded an album with Phil Rudd.
Great.
Phil Rudd, I'm sure you guys know your AC/DC history.
Absolutely.
When he first left the band, or got kicked out of the band, what happened, he went to New Zealand.
Yep.
And he was
I believe he's still living there, right?
Yeah, he's still based there. He ended up just out of Tauranga, which is not too far from where I grew up.
And did he have had a studio up there?
He did. He built 24 track. Like, he didn't convert a building, or he built from ground up.
Yeah.
Track studio. It was called Mountain Studios. I don't know what's happened to it, if it's still around or whatever. I know he doesn't live at the same property because more recently he was living on the waterfront, but this was out, and he had like 20 or 30 acres.
Nice.
Out kind of, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes from Tauranga itself.
You did an album with him?
Yeah, we did. And this was early 90s stuff, right? And
what was the name of the band?
Whisper Scream.
Nice, mate. I'll be looking that up shortly.
Yeah, we did a reunion gig. So we went back to New Zealand in February of this year, just before COVID, right?
Awesome.
And we hadn't seen each other for 26 years, the guys. There's 4 of us.
Wow.
I kept in contact with the drummer, so I've seen him, as the years gone by, but the singer and the bass player, I hadn't seen those guys for 26 years. And we got together the day before the gig and rehearsed, just did a couple of, I don't know, probably an hour, 2 hours, something like that. And then we did the gig the next night. And it was funny, isn't it? When you played so much with guys like that, 26 years, you came back together and we just straight away.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Agreed. Yeah. That's great, mate. Well,
and just more recently, I've been playing in the covers band around here. So we had a residency at the Swan Hotel in Richmond up until about 18 months ago, something like that. I think we finished up. The guys had been there. I was only with that band for about 2 years. The guys had been there for two and a half years before I started playing with them. So they nearly had 5 years there.
It's really important with this stuff, though. Like, and I find, and my brother does a lot of pedal demo work, and we're obviously being guitar players, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of YouTube channels based around gear demos and all of this sort of stuff. And as much as enjoyable as all of that stuff is to watch and interesting and whatever, none of this stuff, in my opinion, is worth even watching, due to the fact that it always sounds different when you're up on stage or with a band, or the same band in a different room sounds different, or a different room. You know what I mean? It's the soup that defines a piece of gear, generally speaking, in my opinion. And so from your point of view, when you knock up and you're sitting at home and you're tinkering away and you're designing all of these circuits and coming up with this and that, the fact that you can then take them out, and even in whatever environment, whether it be covers, originals, recording, as long as it gets thrown into a soup to be tested,
drums and bass to hear.
The only way to test them is to get
it is the only way, you know.
It's you know it's going to work, right? Because mate, I have taken amps to that gig. I remember a bit like talking about that Dirty Shelley that I did. I take it along. I take 2 amps, right? Because I was still didn't really know. I kind of knew what I was doing, but I had not completely clearly. And I take 2 amps. I had a Sir Badger 35. That's right. Mm-hmm. And I had my Dirty Shirley home build, and I'd take it to the gig and I'd put them both on top of each other.
Yeah.
My A rig and my B rig. Mm-hmm. And I'd get halfway through the first set. This happened 4 gigs in a row.
Yep.
And I'd get halfway through the first set and my Dirty Shirley would just start making this fucking noise like hell had come. And I'd have to like run to the back line and turn it off. And all the guys in the band are going, fucking here we go, right? And I'd quickly...
But you had the facility to just go clunk, clunk, clunk into the bottom band.
And turn the Badger on, and then I'll play through the rest of the gig with that.
But this is really fucking important, because to me that it's as much about the reliability of it as it is the tone almost. Yep. I would much prefer to have an amp that's not going to break down, that sounds like shit, than an amp that sounds fucking great, but at any moment it could just turn off.
Oh, wait, it was like that at the beginning. Yeah. And then I finally found the problem. Like it took ages. Like, and the reason this was, I could not find this problem. And you know what it was? It was actually the vibrations of either the drum or the bass amp that was making it go like this, right? And so I take it home and I crank it up here, and I fucking just wind it up, right? Either into a cab or
and couldn't emulate the problem.
I couldn't get it like perfect, and I take it to the gig, and then within 3 songs it would shit itself. I was like, what the fuck's going on with this thing?
Case in point, I mean, this is it. You'll never be able to emulate that in a beautifully produced with titles and fucking backing track YouTube demo video. Like nothing can emulate that, and so it's really important that this stuff gets field tested. I believe, and sometimes you'll be playing a fucking Boss Metal Zone at home, and you think it's the greatest tone that you've ever fucking heard, and you get it up on stage and it just disappears. You can't even hear it, right?
Have you tried, Scotty? Have you tried using a modeler, XFX or whatever?
I haven't, but I need to be very careful with while speaking about this for obvious reasons. But no, I've never. I've got a Strymon Iridium, which I really like. I travel with that for hotel room jams and demoing and whatever. I love that pedal, but I've never used it live. A lot of close associates use modelers, and once again, it depends on the artist. There's certain bands that are very much suited to that kind of volume controllability, and there are other bands that would never function with it. And I guess I'm from the latter category. So I've never tried them, but I've certainly sat in control rooms and sat at home here and played through them, and it's like you can build yourself fucking the MCG in a heartbeat. But this stuff disappears a lot of the time up on stage, right? And that's
Right.
if you've got a stage of which you know the parameters of that stage, and no one even knows what stages are going to be like when you turn up.
Yeah.
They're all different, you know, and so it's for that reason that you know, a pedal that sounds great at home may sound like fucking shit up on stage, and vice versa.
Well, I think it's really important when you're designing an amp as well to have it in a context. Yeah. So, like in our workshop, there's a drum kit and a bass rig, always set
Yeah.
up,
I love that.
because you don't know. Like a guitar isn't supposed to be played by itself. It's supposed to be played in context. And there's lots of times where you'd be like, "That sounds amazing," and then someone jumps on the drums, and you're like, "Where did it go?"
Mm.
So it's
100%.
essential.
These guitar amps, right? And a lot of it, you see, obviously, we see a lot of this in the kind of, you know, more modern metal kind of stuff, right? And there's like guitar sounds that take up the whole frequency spectrum,
Yep.
right down where the bass is. And by themselves, everyone goes, "Wow, it sounds amazing," right? But then you put it in an amp, or with a band, sorry, and it's like it takes up everyone else's space, and then it's not actually through the mids. You lose it.
And your sound guy is going to high pass it and low pass it anyway. So
yeah.
I guess that's that's very much a genre issue that we're talking about here. You know, it's the modern guitar tone as compared to the classic. Because I guess there's something about that classic guitar tone, the dad rock tone that everyone keeps calling it, that kind of mixes itself. It sits within a frequency range that an electric guitar needs to be in an acoustic environment. You know what I mean? Whereas in a digital environment, with which so many of these things these days are created for and in, they step on each other, and they can very much create harmonic problems and cross talk and standing waves of, you know, just stuff that I guess I'll never have to deal with because I'm from a different kind of area of dad rock, I guess. But I don't know. They're self-mixing. The classic guitar tone is almost a self-mixing instrument, you know. With
my other gig is a front of house guy, and I can tell you that I know with modelers and amplifiers. So when I have an amp with a mic, most of the time, it sits in a mix better. Like my main guy that I've worked with for ages, Diesel. You know, it's about guitar and vocal for him. Yeah,
sure.
And, an amp definitely. It just sits there, and I don't have to.
Yeah.
I'm not. You know, with a modeler, I find that I am like, I need a little bit more. No, too much. Down a bit. No, it's not right. Like I'm always hovering up and down with most models that I use. But
it's kind of loud, but you still can't hear it.
Yeah, exactly. But I see the point of them. Like
I do too. I guess
you know
we're naive to think that they're ever going away. There's no doubt that they're here to stay. I guess, and
better.
I think it'll be. I mean, there's certain clubs around the world now that you can't play acoustic amplifiers. You must play, you know, direct into the PA so as to be able to not throwing so much level off stage and all these kinds of things. But I guess I'm from a different school, and I'll always be in front of an amp. It's funny. It's not about the way it sounds; it's the way it feels. You know, and because you can make these digital modelers sound very, very similar to what it is you're kind of chasing, but they never fucking feel the same. They never feel the same. And to me, that's everything. You know, it can make or break a gig. Full stop. That's just for me. So I guess that's it. You know, I see their place, no doubt, in the studio and recording environment, and certain artists that require low level on stage and all these kinds of things. I don't play in that. I just don't, and I don't think I ever will, and that's fine.
Yeah, look, you know, I'm mates with Jack, you know, Erwin, and
Yep.
he's been using an X3, which sounds
Yep.
mega. It sounds amazing, that guy playing
Sure.
through it. But for
He can make a fucking toaster sound great, mate.
yeah.
But you're right.
He needs racks of gear to do his gig, yeah. Whereas he can just rock up with that one unit and get the same thing everywhere, and and it sounds fantastic in playing through it, yeah. But I've had him play through that and then plug in one of my old Marshalls. It's like, oh, hello, So
yeah, there's something inspiring about the battle, about the fight with volume that I love.
Yeah.
Fight
is a good
term.
It's
a fight. It's kind of this
you can tell like an electric guitar player, you can actually tell the guys that have had to control it on stage, right? So the way that you'll keep the guitar under control, you use your volume pot, and just that combination of stuff of just keeping keeping the amp down when you need it, bringing it up, controlling all the background noise and that kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of young guys coming through that are missing that, like they haven't had that experience. So they're growing up on, Kempers and all the rest of it. And you get into a live situation like that, it's a different beast altogether.
It is. And it's no less valid, but it's just different. It is different. And I guess it's the way I've learnt, the way I've come up, and I actually enjoy that battle. That it's not battle's the wrong word, but there's a real
challenge.
You've got to give and take.
It's a challenge to kind of make any environment that you're thrown into work, and it's not easy. And sometimes I don't know. It's enjoyable trying to find it, and you do have to be dynamic, and you've got to change the way you think about everything. You're constantly on, and you're reassessing the situation. Whereas I find that when you're given something that is so clinical, and the parameters are locked in, and that it's not going to change. It just won't change because it's fucking digital, and the numbers say it's exactly what it was last night. That just kind of bores me. I'm not condemning it, but that's for me the way that it is, And I guess there's a certain swagger about trying to control this fucking out of control thing that I really enjoy, And that's the beauty of a Valve amp.
Yeah, well, that was kind of one of the things that drew me into doing sound at the start as well, was old analog boards. That's what I started on, yeah. And I walked up to one of those, and it was 1, 2, 3, go, and you had to pull a mix and drive this thing, and there was a thrill about it, yeah. And nowadays, you walk up with your stick and you plug your stick in, and it's like bling, and everything's there, and you go, yep, okay, and then you do stuff to get it going within the environment and the PA that you're working on, but.
So what's your starting point? So when you rock in with your presets, is that from the last gig, or from you've got a preset dialed in from rehearsal or something like that?
Yeah, well, look, with my band, with Diesel, we never do production rehearsals, so it's always been say with the profile, which is the desk you commonly sort of get at festival gigs. That was just pieced together over gigs, and then you can take it home and do a little bit of work on it, and then I've got kind of a rough start. So I sometimes, if I'm on a tour, say like we do the Red Hot Summers, and it's the same production, same PA, every gig, I'll continue from where I left off, unless I thought that last gig sucked. But most of the time, I've got one that's roughly in the ballpark, because I don't like it to be done. I like for me to do something at the start of the gig. I don't like it to be cooked. I want it to be hard for me.
Yeah.
If it's too easy, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I get it.
I like that panic. The first song, Panic.
And the second song, and the third song.
Yeah, I know. And then all of a sudden it's over and you go,
Oh, and the last song, Panic. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I've got it right. Oh,
I get it.
but yeah.
Yeah,
Look, you know,
our
I
friend
guess
Athel's just sent me a message.
just adapt to whatever the technology presents you, you know. But I still,
I guess for the desk, it's around, right? You know, just the layout of it's good for setting up your standard routing scenario for those multi-layered kind of consoles that have got.
Yeah,
you know.
it's really good for that. Just getting it so your workflow is kind of the way you want it. And
Yeah, you know where things are and whatever. Yeah,
processes that you want, and you know you've got a head start.
Yep.
But like you know, it's good learning different consoles and different amps and blah blah. Like, and I think we're in a good stage now where you can take a valve amp. Like if it's quiet, you know, there are boxes like the tube amp expander and the Capture X and all those things which have opened up more possibilities of using those. Like I know, like, you know, I've used against modelers and compared them with a JMP running into a tube amp expander, and like I definitely prefer that. Definitely prefer that.
So one thing I find with that stuff was, and I agree with you, and on paper they read beautifully, these devices. You think, wow, how great will that be to be able to plug your beautiful valve head into your computer at home and play it, and fuck, you know. But what I've found with a lot of them is that it never sounds the same on playback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
For me, there's always something that's slightly different about the way that it's being captured and converted. Today was the first day that I plugged the 2 notes torpedo in with this head, and I have got to say that it sounds exactly the same on playback as what it does whilst I'm playing it. I am stoked with that. Like, truly, fuck, I'm going to do so much recording with this. If it never leaves this room, I won't give a shit. And in fact, with all due respect to the wattage of it, I don't think it's going to be loud enough for the jets.
That's right. Make gas will carry around 100 watt.
Well, this is what makes me have to build the next one, which is twice as loud. But for a recording device, this thing is beautiful. Like I truly could live with this for the next couple of albums, and the combination of that little 2 notes load box, fuck, I'm blown away with it. And today was the first day I did that. So very impressed with that as a box.
So wattage, because I had like that gig we were doing at the Swan, which on a Friday night would just pack out, right? That place would just be shoulder to shoulder, and we were just playing. So we had drums and vocals through front of house because it's just kind of quite a small front room there. Guitars straight off back line.
Yep.
Which was kind of awesome because you could just fucking crank your amps. So I played a whole bunch of different amps in that room just to, you know, and I got a kind of really good feel for what wattage you would need. And I had a Badger 18 actually before I got that Badger 35 I was talking about before, which is kind of pretty much the same power section that's in the amp that you've just built, Scott.
Yep.
And it was loud enough for rhythms, right? Like a loud drummer, hard hitter, right? Loud drummer. Yep. And he also had, like, the drums are through front of house as well, so it was quite, you know, there was never no shortage of drum sounds. And it was a 2 guitar band as well, and the other guy's fucking loud player too, bastard. And so you had to be loud, otherwise you'd just be gone, right?
Well, you can finish that sentence there. You just had to be loud. Full stop.
You had to be loud, right? So that amp, I would just crank it, and it just sounded awesome because you just like maxed it, right? And it was just when I went to do a lead, I just couldn't. Quite get above the other guy.
So is that 212? So you're using what box are you using in that situation?
12. Yeah, 12 at that time. I ended up.
Well, I can see that being the case. It's a beautiful tone. There's no doubt about it.
It sounded great, and you could crank it, and you get the power stage is cooking, and it was awesome.
So here's a question for you that's slightly off topic. Do you think these PCB amps, of which you're obviously very familiar with, and is there any benefit to a turret board situation as opposed to a PCB, tonally speaking? Here's a Pandora's box for you.
Classic question.
Because it kind of interests me, purely because it is these minute differences in amplifiers that can really make the difference in the big picture. How do you feel about that?
I don't believe so. That's my view. So
okay.
I know there's this big thing about point to point and hand wide and blah blah blah. Like Mike Soldano is probably the guy on the planet that's been asked that question the most. Right. So when the Slow 100 came out, it's PCB amp. Right. And I've again, there's a guy that I've read a lot about, and I've seen a lot of interviews with him and that kind of stuff. Right. The thing about PCB, I think, is that it's less prone to build problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think most of the problems that happen with hand wired amps is that because they're hand wired, there's when I hand wired, I mean, how much hand wiring did you do in your amp build, Scott? Like a lot, right?
I guess, yeah.
Wired mean, well, what does that actually mean, right? You built that by hand. You soldered everything by hand. So all the PCB did for you was basically set out what you would have otherwise done with turrets. These boards are they're 2 mil thick glass, right? They're 2 ounce copper tracks on them.
Yep.
The tracks are anywhere between 80 or 60 mil in inches. I mean, like they're quite fat tracks.
Yep.
And also, if you have a look at the boards really closely, you'll see that. I don't know if you can see it on here. It's probably not enough light, but you can see it. You'll see it on your board. They've got ground planes on them.
Exactly.
Right. So the whole front of the board here has a grounded copper all the way through it. It's a Faraday cage, right? It's a shield. It's a ground shield. And the whole preamp, all the components on the preamp, and all my boards are like this, are fully ground shielded. There you go, that way, all the way through here.
Yep.
And then I do another one through normally kind of cathode follower and phase inverter section and so on. And there's a couple of advantages for that. One, it makes it really easy to run all the grounds, all the ground points, but also it's a shield. So it shields against electromagnetic.
So in the scheme of things, that is that's a high quality PCB board. Like for
there's a better chance you're going to build a quiet amp.
Well, it's no PV Classic, but
Correct, right? So the bigger thing, so as you play around with this shit, right, and you build a few of these things and fuck around with them, you'll build an amp and you'll turn it on and it'll hum and you'll go, oh fuck. Right, this or so it's either you'll have 50 cycle hum in it or 100 hertz hum. It's always going to be a multiple of that. Or you'll have a horrendous hiss in it, which is gain, right? So in the preamp section, you turn the gain up coming through it, and you've got to find it and you've got to fix it, right? So any combination, you can have both of those things at the same time. You can have 100 hertz hum and all these things. And point-to-point stuff and turret board stuff, because everything's kind of exposed and
very susceptible to that, right?
Very much so.
Yep.
Okay.
And everything's running parallel on a turret board as well, which ain't great for noise.
Well, I hope Woz doesn't mind me saying this, but early on, before I'd even spoken to you, Jace, Woz mentioned your product, and he's in his learned opinion said these are very high quality boards, right? So I was steered very much not only by was, and Joseph and all of that sort of stuff. But truly, I know not why he would have said that. So I guess it's me asking you that question to try and find out what it is that's I don't know what I'm.
Question to was right. So I think one of the myths, I guess, or one of the I guess bad rap that PCBs get is that when you look at a lot of the high volume build amps, right, stuff that's built in factories out in freaking China or whatever, they got PCB mounted tube sockets and PCB mounted pots. So everything,
and they suspend the board from the
everything's on the board.
Yep.
Tube sockets, everything, right? And the issue is in an amp, you had a board like this and it's mounted on the chassis, into the chassis, right? You got tube sockets on the board as well, whichever way. Now, over time, people pull these bloody tubes out and push them back in, and it's on the board.
Sure.
Yep.
Right? And it's kind of okay, and a lot of amp manufacturers do it and kind of get away with it, but that's where you kind of get like all of a sudden a track will crack or whatever, right? And the amp dies.
Yeah,
I really like that method of construction because with pots mounted on the PCB and tube sockets, because I've made a crap load of money out of fixing that crap over the 30 years. Yeah.
100%.
Dry joints.
they're servicing your industry. Yeah, right.
Like the PV Classic man.
So I guess what you've created then is a hybrid of these two worlds, right? Which is
So
you take
the Soldano. I mean, the SLO 100 it's a beautiful amp. Either way, those are built, man. You look inside them, you just go, this thing is military spec.
Built like a hot rod.
Amazing.
not a hot rod to build. They're all tube socket. They're on the PCBs, right?
Rod, yeah. You've replaced your caps on the hot rod. Yeah?
I have. Yeah.
How hard was it? Did you get any tracks lifting?
No, I hadn't because it was in pretty good nick, but just to get it was fucking pain in the ass. To pull the thing apart was ridiculous. And those ribbon cables that hold the two boards together, they're as fragile as what I'm assuming you were talking about with the Classic 30, right?
Yeah. No, they're actually really good compared to the Classic 30.
Right, but as good as they are, they're still fiddly and they're susceptible to.
Those amps are terrible. Those fenders, they're terrible. Like tracks lift off, horrible boards. Even a lot of the Marshalls, like tech guys know all about the TSLs and DSLs. Yeah, their boards, they went conductive. So that's what's given PCB boards a really bad rap over the years.
Okay. Cool.
If you're building something with gain, you have to go PCB. Like doing it point to point, like you were saying, you don't have that shield on the board, the Faraday cage. Yeah, it keeps it quiet. It's predictable. Right. If you're building an old school Fender, even an old school Marshall, or like a Matchless or something like that, cool. Go point to point. That's really nice for those lower gain things. There is a sort of breadth, and especially when you go actual point to point. Like a component is soldered from one point to the other. Makes
which is not turret board, right? A lot of people call turret board point to point.
Point to point, which is
right. Okay. Yeah.
So it makes a difference. But if you're doing something that's channel switching and has got some gain, PCB all the way.
But a good quality PCB.
I found you, Jason. I was so happy.
Yeah, nice. Well, credit to you there, Jason.
So these actually, do you know where these get made?
No, where?
China.
Really? China.
Yeah.
China.
China. China. That's it. So what you do, right? And I am kind of searching around to see whether there's, I think. So Don, as I was talking about, Don from Melbourne before, he pinged me the other day and said he was looking at another mob in Malaysia, actually, that also manufacture these things. But like everything on the planet, right, whether it's an iPhone or a or a motherboard for a computer or whatever, right? All this stuff is manufactured in factories in China.
Sure.
And you go to a website. This is at allpcb.com. So ALL allpcb.com. Anyone can go up there, and you load up your design files online. Right. You know, create an account. You load your files up, and you go order. And within 3 hours or something, they come back and they verify that it's okay, because if they actually do it, they'll do a. It's not checked by a human being. It's checked by a program, whatever, right? They actually check the
simulator. Yep.
Load it up, which you export the files out of the design software. You load them up there, and then you they check them, and you get like the green tick, or you get a cross, right? And you go back, oh fuck, what the problem was. And then you choose the spec of the board. So you choose the thickness.
Okay.
You choose the spec for the copper. You choose whether it's single-sided or double-sided. These are all double-sided boards, which is why there's two solder masks, right? So you've got the solder pads on the top and the bottom. You choose the color. So you can have gloss green, gloss black. These are matte black with white solder mask.
Yep.
The amount of time, well, not the amount of times, but believe me, I've made every mistake in the book. I've click, ordered, and they've turned up 2-3 weeks later or whatever, and it's like, oh, fuck, they're green. What? I was expecting ones like this. Oh, God.
Limited edition green.
Or whatever. Every mistake you'd possibly mention I've done. And then you order, obviously, quantity. And then the more that you order, the lower the
cost.
Prices, sure. Right? But yeah, it's amazing. You just like go click, bang, and then like 2 weeks later or something, a DHL package arrives on your front doorstep, and a stack of these.
Well, I think I mentioned to you there, not too far into the build, that how pleasurable it was that every component fitted perfectly, mate. There was not one component that felt like you had to force it in, or and
getting the footprint. That was the other thing that Don, because when Don was giving me a bit of coaching about building these, getting started with the design software. So these are called footprints, right?
Yep.
All these little things are footprints, right? Whether it's for the voltage regulator there, that's a heat sink one here. This is obviously the filter caps.
Yep.
And then resistors and normal caps and so on. You can kind of reuse those. But I was like, where do you get these footprints from? Like, because the software comes with a basic library, but they're all not the ones that you want. And he goes, mate, you'll build your own library. I was like, oh no, you're kidding. He's like, you will.
And you have.
Fuck. And I did. Yeah, you do. It's the only way to do it. So,
well, dude.
Yeah. But once you built the footprint, right? Once you've got like that filter cap footprint.
Yep.
Once you've created that, and because you measure it out, right? I go to the Mouser, you find the component that you want. You look at the spec sheet. You get the spacing, the lead spacing exactly, the diameter of the thing and the whole thing, and then you build the component, the footprint in the software. Once you've defined it, it's an object, and then you can just use it.
Call upon it whenever you want. Hey, there's one thing. There's one rookie thing I've got to admit to here that it's the only thing that bugs me about my build. It's a fucking classic too. I think you'll laugh about it. But I actually soldered in the snap-in filter capacitors.
You do?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, you snap them in and then you solder at the bottom.
Yeah. I thought you just snapped them in and then that's how you replace them, by not soldering them.
No, solder them in there.
Oh, fuck, I'll sleep a lot better tonight then. So how do you actually replace them? I mean, I guess you get 10 to 15 years out of them anyway, right? Is that the idea? Or
you have to lift the board. So I have thought about that, and I'll be interested in your feedback actually, because I've thought about, these are all obviously like this. It's all in one.
Yep.
And some amp designers, right, you know, like renowned amp makers and so on who do PCB stuff, will actually separate power amp from the rest of the board and have two boards.
Yeah.
You've got to wire them all up. But the idea is that you could then pull the power thing out easily without having to take the risk.
If you need to, right. Okay, well, that's cool, because I was only after the fact that I read snap-in filter capacitors, and I'm thinking, do these things just go in and you just go click, and that way you can replace them when you need to? But I'd actually soldered them in thinking,
so when you put it in the board, it kind of clicks in.
It did do that. That's right. Yeah. They look like they're pretty good quality caps too, right? I'm assuming everything you put on that list of components is fairly high quality, right?
It's all, yeah. I mean, if you opened up any kind of, you know, decent quality, you know, like put it this way, right? The stuff that's that you put on that board, you can go to Deluxe Guitars and spend $5,500 on an amp, pull it apart, and you'll see it's exact same components.
Okay, yeah, great. So this is another thing you bring to the party, man. It's like to have had that. That was a big concern for me, and I remember asking you early on before buying this board, do you send me something that tells me what else I'm going to need here? You know, and of course you did. And having never had a Mauser account or you know, Vatco or any of that stuff, I mean, it was completely from scratch. Where the hell am I going to get all these thousands of bits and pieces that I need? And to your credit, that comes with it. So people should be mindful of that. You get that with you know, and this is all your work that's come to this point, dude. It's fucking great, mate. Truly, I'm so glad I've taken this on. There were times before I started to build, I'm thinking, what the fuck have I done? You know, but now I can't tell you the amount of messages and emails and stuff and calls that I've had from people going, dude, tell me what you know. I can't.
I had someone who obviously follows you, or one of your mates, Scott, sent me a message. He wanted one of the Fender circuits. I can't remember which one.
Okay.
So
look, it's questionable. It's questionable as to whether anyone will follow through with it, but it's been nice to be able to shine a light on both of your work. You know, you too, was. It's, you know, yeah, great vibe.
Yeah. Well, I think we might wrap it up there, but thanks for joining in on this little discussion. I'm sure we'll do it again.
I hope so, yeah.
We'll kind of do it so that people can see and we can answer some questions and bits and pieces, yeah?
Yeah, man.
Adios.
Thanks.
Anything I can do to help repay the favours, I don't know what I can do. You can come and drink our rider whenever you want. That's about as much as I can offer.
I'm looking forward to coming along to a gig this week.
But dude, legendary work. Thanks again, Woz. And
all right, hang on the line and I'll just end it. Thanks. See you guys soon.
Cool.